2 years ago, the Lord spoke to me as I drove down Park Street. "You will preach," he said, and it was a loud whisper. My life was forever changed with that word. It was on the outside where God called me in. It was outside of the church God revealed my calling. It was on the outside where God will interrupt your life to activate his plans. He revealed the new he had for me. There's a lot of old that I had to let go of in those years in between then and now. Old dreams, old mindsets, old relationships, old anxieties, old expectations that anchored me and clouded my vision and desire for new. Sometimes God will allow us to taste the desires of our heart so we can see its taste may be sweet, but it's not purposed. With God, new isn't just different, it's always better, purpose, bigger than you and perfect for you. Sometimes we can't receive or expect new in the same old setting. The church isn't the issue, but the expectation that God is limited to it is. God, I thank you for this opportunity to come before you, to put a pause on the chaos that's happening around this world, God, and lay down at your feet. I thank you for your new anointing, your new revelations, God, that you want to impart into your people. I pray that you use me and remove anything that is not of you, God, anything that's not that you want to speak, God. Have your way. Speak to your people. Soften their hearts to receive the new that you want to bring today. I thank you for this opportunity, God. I thank you for your call. We love you and we expect you, God. Amen. Hello, FOL family. Good morning. It is such a blessing and an honor to be here. I know you were expecting Pastor G, but I decided to give him a little break this Sunday. And I think we can all agree that this is pretty crazy. What the heck am I doing here right now? Crazy, but it's God. And I'm excited for the word that he's going to bring to us today. I believe there's some things that he wants to uproot in this season. And I know that there's some old that needs to be released to receive the new that he wants to do. And so today's message is titled Bursting at the Seams. And we're going to be reading from Luke chapter 5, verse 27 through 39. And when we begin this story, we see Jesus as he meets Levi, the tax collector. And he comes up to Levi and he says, "Follow me." And Levi's like, okay, just leaves everything. And he runs home and prepares this huge banquet for Jesus and his disciples. And so they show up and they're having a great time celebrating. Levi probably hired a flutist and got the finest wine and got the best meat. And they're having a great time. And amidst this celebration, the Pharisees, the religious leaders at the time, interrupt this celebration. And they question the disciples and Jesus. And they ask, "What are you doing eating with sinners?" And what stood out to me, going back a few steps, is that Levi understood the appropriateness of celebrating God. He had to have heard about him. He's a tax collector. He's out there in the city, and he might not have known why he left everything, but he knew whose presence he was in the midst of. And so he runs, he leaves everything, and he goes to throw this party for God. And the disciples are there, and they're probably wondering, what are we doing eating dinner with the tax collectors too? They're probably wondering, they're tax collectors. That at least some of the people had to have hated them a little bit. But what's so special about Levi and the disciples is that they didn't discount themselves nor who was at the table. And the sad thing is that the religious leaders had the same opportunity as them to celebrate God, to be in his presence. But with their questioning and their judgment, they were unable to receive the thing that God so freely wanted to bestow upon them. They could have been enjoying and dining with Jesus too. I mean, imagine the opportunity to eat kebab and drink wine and talk with and laugh with Jesus. I'm there. Yet, so often we miss the opportunity to celebrate God because we are bound in judgment. We're bound with who's at the table. We question God and we ask him, why now? Why here? Why them? You sure? We want to limit God to our comfort. But God is more concerned with our sustainability than our comfortability. He didn't come here to make us comfortable. He came here to flip the world right side up. This story reminds me of a time when I was working, and at lunch there would be this crew of people who love to gossip, love to be stuck on negativity, and there's a lot of darkness. And I didn't want to be bothered with it, to be honest. So I would separate myself from them. I would go on my phone or go on the computer. I would do whatever I could to distance myself from them. And one day I was convicted by the Lord, and he really ministered to my heart and showed me that I was missing an opportunity to be a light in the midst of that darkness. I missed the opportunity to bring that experience of God to the table because I was judging who was sitting there. Because I forgot what it was like to be a sinner sitting at the table. And as the Lord was convicting me, I shifted my perspective, and I had the opportunity to enter into that space and to glorify his name. But how sad is it the times where we miss that opportunity? How sad is it that the religious leaders had the same opportunity as everyone else to be amidst God, but they were so stuck on who was at the table, they didn't even count the cost that they weren't there. So I want to ask this question. What opportunities are you missing because you're judging someone's position or their stank? My second point, where are we missing God's fruition because we're bound to tradition? They had the living word amongst them. He was right there. He was talking with them. They could feel the heat off his body. This is the very thing they had been waiting for. It's the very thing they had been fasting for, praying for, reading and learning for all these years. And he was right there, and they missed him because they couldn't recognize who he was because he didn't come in the form that they expected him to. And because they didn't have God in their heart, they hid behind the law that allowed them to avoid what was missing in them, to avoid getting close, to avoid sitting at the table, to avoid being uncomfortable, to avoid being inconvenienced, to avoid touching the dirty, to avoid the very thing that God came here to do, to avoid the very people that God came here to save. Let's not miss God because he isn't coming the way that we expect. What are things that haven't worked out that you keep doing because of tradition? Because your family did it, because your grandma did it, because you learned it 15 years ago, because it's what you think God expects of you. Where are you missing God when he's standing right there in front of you? When you can feel his breath upon your skin? Their tradition got in the way of them seeing the very thing they had been waiting for. Where do we miss God? Because he doesn't come in the way we expect. Because it's not our timing. Because it's not who we thought it would be. Because it's not the city we thought we'd be in. Or it's not the place we thought we would be in. Or it wasn't on our vision board. Where are we so stuck in our sacrifices that we can't recognize the living sacrifice? Point 3. Where are we trying to contain God's new in our old? The second time the religious leaders questioned Jesus was when they asked, why aren't your disciples fasting and praying? For one, God had just asked them to follow him. They just left their boats in their nets. They probably still smelled like fish. How, for one, could you have the audacity to question Jesus? But two, how could you compare to men who didn't even know what fasting and prayer was? And so Jesus responds to them, and he gives them a parable. And two of the examples that he used is the new garment put on the old, and the new wine being poured into old wineskins. And I love the example of the wineskins because I believe that the wineskins represent our capacity. And so what Jesus is saying, when we desire for his new wine, his new ways, his new covenant, his new revelations, his new truth to be poured into our old traditions, our old mindsets, our old expectations, our old shame, our old depression, our old anxieties. The old skin will burst because it has no capacity left to contain the new. And it bursts and it ruins the new and the old. God was telling them that their old ways to going about serving him could not contain what he now had. He was right there. His newness was right there. You would think that you have God right there in front of you, that you'd at least ask God, is this still the way you want me to do it? I know we've been doing it forever, but since you're here now, we have the chance to ask you, is this still what you want us to do? You want us to switch or not do it as much? Or they had the opportunity to be students at that time, to learn from the one who created the laws. But where in our own lives are we trying to contain God's new and our old? God cannot and will not be contained to our old ways of accessing him. He's telling us in this story that if we put his new in our old, we will erupt where he wanted to expand. When you look at the new wine being poured into the old wineskins, where we're typically made out of goat skins, it was poured into that so that it could ferment. It had to go through a process. And it was made to contain what it would take to expand to its capacity. That's what it was designed for. The new and the new. We don't get to skip that process that God is inviting us into. My last point is, what is keeping you tethered to the old? Is it fear? Is it comfort? Is it your investment? Is it to skip the process? Is it the inability to conceive that God can bring any better than what you're currently sitting in? Like old wine, is it because it tastes sweeter? At the end of this verse, we see the old is better. I believe sometimes we get stuck because the old tastes better. Old wine is aged. It grows in value and taste. But just because the taste may be sweeter doesn't mean it's purposed. So what is it for you? What binds you to the old? If I had stayed stuck to the old in my life, there's no way I would be standing here. There's no way. There's only so far we can get with God until we release the old containers that have no space for the new things that he's wanting to do. I fought God so hard because I couldn't conceive that he had a new that was better for me. I was stuck in fear. I was stuck in anxiety and depression. I was stuck in the taste being sweeter. But I didn't have purpose. I didn't have the process that refined me, that strengthened me, that got me to the place where he needed me. So what is it for you? Is it being twisted in ritual and specific ways of accessing God when he's wanting to bring in a new way? When he wants to speak to you in a different mode? When he wants to reach your heart, the depths of your heart that he's unable to touch because our wineskins are burst? God's not afraid of our dirt, but we have to give it to him. God's not afraid of our old, but we have to release it. Isaiah 43:18-19 says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland." God is wanting to pour his new ways of experiencing him and our new ways of receiving him. And I believe what God is wanting to tell us in this season of our global wilderness is that everything must change to make room for me. The new is always available. Are you? My 2 challenges. And I want us to remember that God's new isn't just new for the sake of new. God is always purpose-oriented. There's always purpose attached. And there are some things that we'll be unable to access without this new that he's wanting to unleash over us. And so my first challenge is to ask God to reveal where you're stuck in your old ways. What mindsets are keeping you bound? What reactions to things? What coping skills that are not fruitful, keeping you from God's newness? The second challenge, ask God to reveal where he desires to bring new in your life. May that be your ministry and your calling, your family, your marriage, whatever season it is that you find yourself. Ask God to reveal what it is he wants to do, to push out the old expectations, the old dreams, the old things that keep you bound to what you want, and put a barrier between what God wants to do. God is doing a new thing. Lord, help us to receive you, God. He's doing a new thing. We should be excited and expectant of God in this season. His wine never runs out. It's always available for us, but we have to be in the place where we are available to receive it. Oh, family, I love you so much. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. This has been such a blessing. And I pray that God interrupts anything that's outside of his plans for your life. That he interrupts any mindsets or dreams or thoughts or old traditions, old way of doing things that are in the way of the new that he has to bring right now. Lord, help us to see when you're face to face with us. You're right here, God. You're never far. That's why you speak in whispers. Father, help us to open our eyes and not miss the you that's standing right in front of us. I love you guys, and I'm praying for you, and I'm expecting newness over you.